Hello and welcome to the Election Tricycle, a podcast where we talk about elections that are going on around the world, and increasingly the aftermath of elections that are going on around the world in the three countries that we're from, India, the USA and the UK. I'm joined, as always, I'm Tom Hamilton in London, by the way. I'm joined, as always, by Emily Tamkin in Washington, D.C.
Hello, I'm actually in Warsaw this week on book research, but covering the news from back home.
This is what happens when you miss the hellos at the start of a podcast episode because you have to take your kids to school. And Rohan Venkat, who I believe is in Cairo, but I'm not going to take it for granted. Rohan, where are you today?
Yes, very much in Cairo, also watching India from afar.
Fantastic. And this week, I think there's no controversy in saying that there's only really one big story in the three elections in our countries, not least because two of them have already happened. Or two big stories. One is that Joe Biden is out, and one of them is that Kamala Harris is in. So let's take those in order because they happened in order. Emily, why is Joe Biden not running?
Joe Biden is not running because finally, somehow, some way, it was conveyed to him that he was not going to win and he was going to take the party and perhaps the country down with him. According to reports, one of the key people involved in this was former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who, if you know anything about recent American politics, you know that she, whatever else you want to say about her, understands power and counting the votes. So she was apparently integral to it, and all of these other high profile Democrats someone had leaked that they were trying to make clear to Biden, you cannot do this anymore, like including Obama. So this Biden out movement was gathering momentum, and then he got COVID. He's in Delaware. And it was sort of, day to day, it was like, it's going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's going to happen. It's not going to happen. And I think finally it happened. I mean, the reason Biden is not running is that Biden could not win this election, right? Every poll that came out was worse than the last. And it got to the point where it was not only are you not going to win the swing states that you need, you might make other states that should not be competitive, like Virginia, competitive. And you're not just going to do that for yourself. You're going to do that for the Senate. You're going to do that for the House. You're hurting this thing that you say that you care about, which is democracy. So I will say, to his credit, finally, after 3 weeks, Biden, I think, did something that I can imagine is very hard, which is give up the most powerful job in the world, which he was going to have to, I think he was going to have to give up anyway from January because he was not going to win. But at least, he gave it up with dignity. And I think I've seen some people online say, we shouldn't say this was a selfless act. He's an elected official, et cetera. And I, on the one hand, agree with that. But on the other hand, Trump would never have done this, right? Like it is sort of a reminder of the importance of not only of strong political parties that can check their leaders instead of becoming cults around them, but also of public officials who can still somehow be reminded that they're there to serve the public. They're not there for themselves.
I mean, to quote Kamala, we exist in the context, right? Like if there was there was someone normal, so to speak, running on the other side, I don't think Joe Biden might have been seen as a hero for doing this. But I think a lot of people are using that term as a very pointed way of saying, look at the other side and look what our side does.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just look what our side does that they don't do, but I think you're right that it's because Trump is so much of a threat that people were, and coming out of the RNC, one of my takeaways was they can beat this guy with a different candidate, right? Like that was not a good acceptance speech from Trump by any stretch of the imagination. Having your candidate doze off while his son is speaking at the convention is not good. Like in any other set of circumstances, I don't think that the Democrats would have been panicking through that RNC, particularly given that the VP chosen was J.D. Vance, who, as we discussed last week, is not really the candidate you pick if you want to do outreach to independents or to women or to any of these less decided groups. Not that women are a less decided group, but actually they are. Like suburban women are one of the famous groups that goes back and forth.
Yeah. And Vance has already said some really hair-raising things in just the last few days about Kamala Harris, about drinking Mountain Dew being racist, about all sorts of very, very odd.
Yeah, I mean,
comments.
as I said on this podcast last week, I don't think that he is a naturally charismatic politician. I think that he's overly online. I think that you can kind of tell what's performance with him. Every politician is performing, but with him, I think it's pretty transparent. I think the claim that Mountain Dew is racist was an example of that. It's like, truly tell me, who is this for? I am basically as close to a walking stereotype of a coastal snob as person can find, right? Like, I'm from New York, I live in DC, I work in journalism, I'm overly educated, I'm Jewish. I had never heard about the Mountain Dew thing. So what ghost are you conjuring up to try to rally your base here? Like, it's weird. It's weird, and people don't want a weird candidate, I don't think. And I think, and by weird, I don't mean like fun and different. I mean, like, who are you trying to be, and what are you trying to prove, and who are you trying to prove it to? Like, truly, who is the target voter for that?
Yeah, I mean, the Mountain Dew thing was not as bad as the thing that I've seen come from a few people on the right recently, about, because Harris doesn't have any children. We'll get to Harris in a minute, but because Harris doesn't have any children, she can't represent. She has no stake in the future of this country, which is just an astonishing thing to say about what will be a very, very, very large proportion of American voters who won't have children.
She also does have stepchildren, and
right.
Many families in America are blended. And again, I don't understand why. Like, listen, if I don't want them to win, so if they want to ostracize people who have stepchildren and stepmothers and stepfathers and sure, go ahead. But a lot of people are divorced and remarried and consider those children to be their children. So, but I think what that exchange showed is that the Republicans really wanted to run against Biden. They really, the convention was about Trump versus Biden. Their whole line of attack was, look at Biden, he is so old. Well, now there's one old candidate in the race, and it's not Ms. Harris. Right? Trump would be 82 by the time he finishes his term if he's elected. So the terms of debate have now shifted in a way that I think I'm sure they'll figure out new, more compelling lines of attack, but I do think they're flailing a bit now.
Yeah, I want to roll back to one thing on Biden there, which is, it's still staggering to me that all of this was kicked off by a debate that his campaign put forward as an idea, as being possibly appealing. Like, for listeners who are not familiar, the Biden campaign proposed an early debate. Debates normally happen in the fall, closer to the election, which happens in November. And in this case, the Biden campaign proposed an early debate, with the idea being that it would draw focus on the Trump versus Biden setup, rather than on questions of Biden's own record. And in a way, it backfired for Biden, but in a way, it's worked out really well for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I saw that's exactly right, Rohan. I saw somebody call it an unforced error from the Biden campaign, and it obviously was. But also, had they not done this, there would not have been time to get a new candidate. The convention would have happened already. This would have, if a debate like that had happened in the fall, there's no, what do you do? That's your candidate. Whereas in this case, they were able to spend 3 weeks, flailing and fighting, and then coalesce around a new candidate who people can get are excited about, go into the convention, and then hopefully go into the fall with more momentum.
One of the interesting sort of lines of attack that is really coming out now, from the Republicans, and there was some talk of this before, but it couldn't land quite as well until Biden absolutely decided he wasn't going to run, is that the Democrats in general, including Harris as his vice president, had colluded in an effort basically to hide from the American people that this candidate was unfit. And part of that has gone to people suggesting that Biden should resign straight away as president. But even people who don't say that are saying, look, the fact that he's not running is an admission that he can't run. If he can't run, he can't serve. If he can't run and serve, what on earth were you doing telling us that he could when you were seeing him on a day-to-day basis, which the rest of us weren't? That's clearly a talking point in the first year. We're less than 48 hours on from the decision. So let's not talk about long-term effects. But how far do you think that one can run and can come back and blow have blowback on both Harris and sort of and Democrats more widely?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously it could dent it a little bit, or a lot. I mean, we'll see how much that ends up mattering with the American people. I don't think there's a pretty easy answer to it, right? Which is, I feel totally capable of Biden, feel totally capable of doing this job, but I understand that the questions around my age and ability have become a distraction, and there's too much at stake for me to be the candidate. And further, while I know I can do this job until November, on reflection, can I do the job for another 3 months plus 4 years, right? That's an easy answer. Now, Republicans are not going to let it go away that easily, and we'll have hearings and we'll try to. So there's sort of two ways this could go. On the one hand, it could succeed in tying Harris to questions of Biden's age, which is to say the campaign will be what it's been about, which is not good for Democrats. Or alternatively, it will keep Republicans sort of fighting the last battle while Democrats move on and push their new message, right? So if you have Kamala out there, as she was yesterday, saying, I'm a former prosecutor, I've gone up against crooks and sexual predators and con artists, so let me tell you, I know Trump's type. If she's saying that and you're just saying, well, Biden's old, like, is that an effective line of attack for you? So we'll see, right? I don't know, but it's certainly a political. It's certainly okay on the part of like Republican political operatives and or Trump supporters. I think there's an attempt to keep the election on the same terms that it was. Mm-hmm. I will also say, like, look, I'm an American citizen. I have questions about why were you all out here telling us, yeah, this guy is going to be the candidate after that debate? Like, why were you telling us that we didn't see what we saw? Right. So there are real questions about how this was handled. But I don't think that means that Harris was involved in a cover up. And I think the difference there will come out in the wash of the campaign.
Yeah, my gut is that it's the opposite of what was happening before, which is I think it is an important and genuine question to be asked. Mm-hmm. And for citizens, like you said, it's relevant, but I don't see it as being a very strong campaign attack, because at the end of the day, Biden is not on the ticket anymore. And right. And as we go into campaign season properly over the next few months, as we get to a debate, like, it may come up, but I doubt voters will care that much. Also because, as you said, that there's a natural argument that he's not only making that, that we have to make some transitional change and so on, but also that it's not about today, it's about the next 4 years. And people are happy to see an old man, retire, let's say, in that sense, rather than being forced out. However it happened, people are not as online as we are. And so right. They'll ultimately see it as a passing of the torch.
And I think it's important to note, because I've seen some, so if that's the conspiratorial right, I've seen some on the left who have said that this was a coup, this was driven by donors, this was driven by the New York Times. I'm sorry, this was driven by voters. Like, this was driven by voters who for years said, I would like a different candidate, please. And granted, like, voters always say that, the most popular candidate is always like the third unknown, but at least often is. But in this case, like, voters were telling the Democratic Party, we are concerned about his age, before the Democratic Party was saying that amongst themselves. So, like, good, that the party should be responsive to its people. It shouldn't be the other way around.
There's a real parallel, actually, and it's only, I want to be really careful about the fact that it's only one particular bit of the parallel that I'm talking about, with Liz Truss and the way that she fell in the UK less than 2 years ago now, where there are all sorts of ways in which Joe Biden is a more significant political figure than Liz Truss. In both
RNC attendee Liz Truss.
Absolutely. Well, she's finding ways to keep herself busy now that she's lost her seat. But one parallel is that you're seeing some people talking about a coup and shady backroom deals and so on. When Liz Truss fell, which was partly precipitated by manoeuvres among the Conservative Parliamentary Party, stuff going on in the media, things happened in the markets as well. Some people did say, look, she was brought down by shadowy forces. Fundamentally, she was brought down because after the mini budget that she held, the Conservative poll ratings fell off a cliff, and suddenly they went to having a 20-point deficit with the public out of more or less nowhere. Massive Labour lead, which incidentally Labour held on to for, until shortly before the election. And just Conservatives en masse thought we cannot possibly go on like this. And it wasn't about shady anything. It was about an absolute inability to lead the party in the face of overwhelming evidence that she couldn't possibly win.
Right.
Yeah, I think you made a important point, and a few others have pointed out. I remember us talking about this in February when a few folks were asking Biden to step down, and Ezra Klein made a big thing in the New York Times. And the polling has been quite consistent that this is not a case of elites going against the base. This is where the base has consistently been ahead of the elites, and the elites finally catching up. But one of the most interesting things for me as part of this idea of comparing our politics is, and I'm divided on this, so I'm curious what you guys think about it. On the one hand, I think in many of our systems, in parliamentary systems particularly, there would be no, this critique of this being undemocratic is almost funny to me because the election hasn't happened yet.
Right.
They haven't chosen a prime minister or president without asking the people. The election still is to come. So on the flip side, I'm like, okay, this shows how deep democracy is in America, that people expect even the person on the ballot to be someone they select, which is great. But at the same time, it's a bit nonsensical because the election hasn't happened and you can't call something undemocratic before voting. So, I see both sides to this, but I find it particularly interesting and uniquely American in a sense.
Yes, it's a reflection of the extent to which we are not a parliamentary system. Look, the idea that it was that this was undemocratic when Biden basically said, "No, I'm running." I'm not listening. It's just, come on. It would be problematic if it were after the convention, but it's not. And also, that's the rule is that they're selected by delegates at the convention. So there's nothing illegal. There's nothing untoward. If you want to say that people should have had more of a choice in the primaries, then people actually should have had more of a choice in the primaries. Right? This idea that Biden came in on a groundswell of support this primary season. No, he's the incumbent. And so he was going to go ahead.
And some of that argument about being undemocratic is coming from Trump and the Republicans saying it's not fair. We wanted to run against that guy because we had him on post.
Right. This idea that, that this was a coup or that this is the same as January 6th. Sorry, no, one is the selection of a candidate totally in accordance with the rules, regulations, et cetera, because somebody is stepping down from power. And the other one was the violent storming of a building because a person did not want to give up power. These are not the same things. And honestly, nobody believes they are. Only people who already want to believe that very badly think that those are the same. So again, they can say it, but I don't really, who is believing that? Who is the voter who's wow, I am just so horrified by the conduct of the DNC, and that's why I'm not voting for Kamala Harris, who is not a Republican, right? Who is the Democratic or undecided voter there?
Yeah, it's the classic attack line that as Tom has often pointed out in the British, it's like trying to have multiple things on at the same front from the Republicans. Sorry, Tom.
No, I was just going to say, let's turn to Kamala Harris in a bit more detail. She is now, as of today, the presumptive nominee. She's secured enough committed supporters to be the nominee. So we're not expecting an interesting convention in the sense that it's not going to be meaningfully contested. She's obviously a figure that we've known about for a while because she's been the vice president for some time. Mm-hmm. She also there was. Well, a few things. One is there was a lot of talk before Biden stood down that one of the reasons Biden might not stand down was that it would be very difficult for Harris not to be the nominee, and that people had a problem with that. There's the fact that she ran a primary campaign in 2020, which was not brilliant. It was good enough for her to get the VP slot, which is more successful than anybody else's bar Biden's, but that's not necessarily how you judge it. How in the first 24 hours there was a really significant both formal and institutional rallying of support behind her and what looked like a groundswell of genuine support from grassroots people talking about it, not much non-support, put it that way.
Right.
How genuine is that? Or is it just, look, she's the only option, let's make the best of it?
I think that she did something very savvy in the days and weeks after that debate, when her name was not being brought up in some corners, or people saying, no, we need a blitz primary, an open primary, which is that she went out and acted like the presidential candidate. Mm-hmm. Right? She was the only one who had the platform to do what she could do, like to do that. And she did it. She took it, and she showed how capably she could speak about threats to democracy, about threats to reproductive rights, about Trump and J.D. Vance. And I think both the fact that it would have been that skipping over the Black South Asian woman vice president for a white governor would have been problematic for many in the Democratic Party. And the fact that an open primary comes with, chaos and potential for further disruption. These three factors sort of coalesced, and she was it. And I have to tell you, I think some people are worried, right? Because will America accept a woman of color as its president? Some people are just
start off with a woman, and then we get to the woman of color.
Yeah, exactly. Some people are just relieved that it's not Biden, but I have to tell you, $81 million is not just that. People are genuinely very excited. I saw a funny tweet that was a young Black professor who said that his aunts were texting him. He was like, it's like 2008 again. No, you have to, you have to join the fundraising calls. You have to get out there. You have to tell your friends. You got Beyonce's mom on Instagram being like, I am so excited that it's going to be Kamala Harris. I genuinely think that for many people, for Black women, for Indian Americans, and just for women, for liberal women generally, it's an exciting. She is an exciting pick, and I think that in 2020 the right person to beat Biden. I think that in 2020 the right person to beat Trump was Biden, because you just wanted because as Ron Klein, his former chief of staff, said, you couldn't caricature him, right? This time you could caricature Biden. It was sleepy Biden, Biden's so old, blah, blah, blah. And also back in 2020, the party was sort of trying to run to the left, and Kamala's whole thing is that she was a prosecutor, and then it's, Kamala's a cop, and Biden sort of didn't care about that as much, and so was able to weather the critique of, you're too moderate or whatever differently. That's not really an issue for her this time. And in fact, the fact that she's a prosecutor and he's a convicted felon, while it may play into dangerous stereotypes about the American justice system, I think will play very well with the American voter. I think she can really hit him where the Democrats are strong and where Trump is weak. And I think that people who have pointed out that in some ways you get the best of incumbency and a change candidate at the same time are correct. So I think, look, I don't think it's going to be a waltz through November, but I think that she can win this thing. I think that people are excited. I think she can make the case. And I think particularly if she picks a compelling vice presidential candidate who can maybe do outreach to voters who are, let's say, more hesitant about a woman of color at the top of the ticket, she can do it.
So you've got these sort of the identity questions as both strengths and weaknesses with different voters. Yeah. Some people really want to vote for a woman of color to be the first woman of color to be president. Some people
and first woman, period.
Absolutely, yeah. Some people may be put off by that, and then there's always a lot of commentary, frankly, and this is not just in America. You get equivalents in the UK of people saying, "This isn't me. I don't mind this, but I worry that other people won't vote for a woman of color."
Right? Yeah, totally. Look, I think that I do think that sexism played a big role in why Hillary Clinton lost. I think you had decades of hatred of feminism that since the 90s people had put onto her individually. But I also think that in addition to that, she ran a bad campaign, right? And also we've now, I do think there's an extent to which, because of that experience, we got some of that out of our system as a voting public, like some of the lines of attack, some of the ways of thinking about it. And I think that, that, it's not that I think that America won't vote for a woman. I don't think that America was going to vote for that woman at that time with the campaign that she ran, that woman being Hillary.
Yeah.
I think Kamala Harris in this case, because people so don't want it to be Trump, and because he has been accused by 26 different women of sexual misconduct, that, I think it's good. Let's go. Let's put it to the test. I just think when people say this, it's like, well, are you going to vote for her? Yeah. Okay, good. Like, let's go.
It's what you mentioned about how she acted in the run up to Biden's decision. Again, I don't follow it as closely as you do, but my sense is that if Clinton had been around, the Clinton campaign was so infamous for briefing and leaking about how it got a sense of arrogance around it. Whereas I feel like there was almost no briefing from the Harris team in those weeks coming up to Biden's decision. There was just keep your head down and act presidential until it comes your way. I think there's a real sense of a different tone. Maybe it's learning from the Clinton period as well. But there's some of that at play as well.
And I think, so in the 2019 primary or the 2019 campaign, I think that Harris actually was hit by something that the Clinton campaign was, which is like, who is she? Like, who is this woman trying to be? And I do think that part of it is that women of a certain, especially women of older generations, sort of had to be all things to all people as they were coming up. And I think that reflected, like, that showed in their political performance. But she's now been on the public stage for longer. And I actually, like, watching her the last few weeks, I don't think there's any question about who she's trying to be. She's more relaxed, she's more competent, she's more secure in her, or she's not trying to walk this prosecutor line. She's like, yes, she's re-embracing it. And I think, yeah, exactly as you say, I think that leads to a perception that's less like arrogant yet secretive and more presidential.
So she was vice president, which means that she's a proper national figure. But she's been a relatively unpopular vice president. She's got, she's not particularly well liked. Some of that may be about decisions that she's made. Some of it may be about the way that she was used by the Biden administration and the things that she was chosen to sort of front up. But other than the sort of identity question, which we just touched on, is will people vote for just a woman who ticks these boxes? What are her other weaknesses, do you think? What can she be? What can she be hit hard on?
I mean, look, the Biden campaign made her border czar, and there was this line toward the beginning of the campaign or the beginning of the Biden administration where some reporter was like, well, you haven't been to the border yet. And she went, and I haven't been to Europe, which, like, iconic, but also what? Like, what? And I think because the Trump campaign is trying to make immigration such a prominent part of this election, they'll try to hurt her with that. We've already seen them try to slut shame her, which I think is going to go really badly for them. I think that, and I also think, like, she laughs, like, yeah, a laughing woman who has sex, like, we're beloved in America. No, I think that, like, I just think that that's not a good line of attack. Like, so I think people will try to caricature her. But I also think, like, I was thinking about this too, watching her yesterday. The reason that she first became such a prominent figure in the Senate is that she was on the Judiciary Committee and did extremely pointed questionings of Trump nominees. And I think that we've forgotten this because she's been painted at, like, look, she's not been used effectively over the past 4 years. Maybe some of that's her. I mean, I'm sure some of that's her. I'm sure some of that's the Biden team. But, like, she's kind of become like, and maybe some of that is just the show Veep, that people are now, like, looking for it, And I think she's become sort of like a meme in some ways, which actually proved to be very effective in getting excitement around her over online in the last few weeks. But I think that people sort of have forgotten that she's like that she's actually quite sharp.
Which
and I think that's now
a presidential candidate after 4.5 years of this. It's just fresh.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I think that people will. I mean, the real thing that she's going to have to grapple with is Gaza. It just is, because I think the left of the Democratic Party wants to vote for her, or not all, but some on the left of the Democratic Party will want to vote for her, but I think will have difficulty bringing themselves to do that if the policy on Israel and Gaza is going to continue to be what it has been. She's not going to.
She's not showing up at the Netanyahu speech.
Right, she's not going to the Netanyahu speech. She'll meet with him separately. Apparently, he's trying to meet with Trump because, of course, because he would prefer, as I have. I mean, this is my own suspicion, is that Netanyahu would prefer Trump to be in office than Biden, so that the minimal critique and pushback that he gets, or rather, critique and pushback that I feel has not been particularly forceful or full-throated, that just goes away. Mm-hmm. But I think that will be the big challenge. I think if in 2019, 2020, the line that they had to walk was because of conversations around police spending and police brutality, and those were important conversations, that made her prosecutorial shtick more difficult. I think this time it will be that there's horrific crimes unfolding, and how do you support America's ally Israel without supporting the continued killing of children? That will be the needle she needs to thread this time.
I think this might be the point at which we need to move on to Tricycle Recommends.
Recommends, yes.
In which we all talk about one piece that we've read, possibly more than one piece, but in my case, one piece that we've read over the last week and enjoyed and want to recommend to our listeners. So I'm going to kick off with a piece that I've just read that touches on some of the themes that we've discussed today, but goes into a bit more detail about where the Trump campaign is now, post the selection of a brand new candidate that they didn't want to fight against. So it's a piece in The Atlantic called "This is Exactly What the Trump Team Feared" by Tim Alberta, which is just quite fun about, I always enjoy reading pieces about campaigns in disarray, having spent part of my career in campaigns in disarray. And I particularly enjoy them when it's about campaigns that I, cards on the table, don't want to win. So some nice insider detail about where Trump's campaign is, and in particular about Trump apparently already rethinking whether J.D. Vance was the right pick, given that he is a candidate optimized to turn out the core vote in an election you're already going to win, not to win over people that you have to win over.
Right.
Who might be swinging one way or the other and might be put off by people who, for example, say that a woman who has no children of her own is a crazy cat lady who has no stake in the future. Not the line I would have chosen. Who's going to go next?
Good example.
For example.
Just for instance.
Yeah. Rohan, what have you chosen this week?
No, I like that. And I saw a tweet of someone mentioning that Trump is going to hate J.D. Vance by November. Possibly even see him as a Diet Mountain Dew version of himself, which might be the case. I'm going a bit further afield, not even to India, but to Nepal, where there has been another change in the prime minister, not because of elections, but because of coalitional intrigue this week. But I'm going to point to a piece in the excellent little magazine called Himal, South Asia, which focuses on things beyond just India in the region. The piece is called "The Saga of C.K. Rawat and the Madhesh Struggle for Justice in Nepal" by Abha Lal. It's a long read about the Madhesh, which is the plains rather than the mountains of Nepal, which has a population that often in Nepal is seen as being Indian, not truly Nepali, and as a result struggling to play a significant role in Nepali politics. It's a fascinating read, even if you're not familiar with Nepal's politics.
And I'm going to take us back to the United States with a piece by Alex Shepard in the New Republic called "Donald Trump is Now the Weaker Candidate." The sort of little, the blurb is, "Beating the former president isn't hard if you have a nominee who can press the case against him. Joe Biden wasn't that person, Kamala Harris is." And it goes through and sort of articulates more eloquently than I have in this episode some of the reasons that if you want to see the Democrats win in November, while not a sure thing, this is a promising thing.
Well, Thank you, Emily and Rohan, for your recommendations. Go away and read them all, and then come back and subscribe to our premium section, which you can do at tricycle.hubwave.net, in which we'll be talking about some extra stories.